We really have some very positive, tangible successes that we can point to. I think that hopefully people will have some confidence in me, particularly a lot of the district who didn't really know me that well, even on election day in 2006. I mean, I'm not going to kid myself. I mean, this was still somewhat of an introductory time for me in parts of the district that didn't know me that well. And I think, again, we've done a lot, I think, to strengthen people's confidence. And the national scene, which again was a big part of this amazing election that took place in 2006, we've certainly had some movement on important issues of the day, but there's no question the frustration level is still very high about the direction the country's headed in. Washington is seen as still trapped in gridlock. I agree. I mean, I see it up close every day. This week, school districts are now getting their final numbers for Title I funding, and it's been an unpleasant week for a lot of school superintendents. And when I see the numbers that came in for, again, high-need school districts, distressed municipalities under Title I, which is the program that funds needy students, and think back to the override vote that we failed by about a dozen in the House last December when the President vetoed the education and health spending bill. Again, it reminds me of why it's important that we need to have a congressman from this district that is pushing as hard as possible to get the priorities better in Washington, and that why this election, hopefully, as Senator Kennedy said at the convention, is going to be our opportunity to break that gridlock, so we will have a federal government that's much more in sync with the needs that exist here in Eastern Connecticut. We only slightly reduced the reimbursements for the Medicare HMOs. The fact of the matter is they're still being overpaid based on the information that we have from a nonpartisan advisory commission to the federal government. And I think they should be at complete parity with traditional Medicare. When Medicare Advantage was sold back in 2005, it was done on the premise that it was going to save the Medicare program money. When it was implemented, they actually gave it an extra cushion for premium payments to the insurance companies. That doesn't make any sense, both from a healthcare standpoint or a budget standpoint, and I think at least it should be brought down to parity, if not hold them to their promise, which is that it actually would cost the system less. Medicare Part D, the issue we talked about so much 2 years ago, I still believe is a program that is wasteful in terms of the design of the system and not allowing the government to engage in best practices for discounted negotiations, which is done both in the private sector and the public sector. So I do think that there are places that we need to look at in terms of wasteful spending. On the military side, I think there are weapons programs, the Future Combat System program, which this administration has insisted on overfunding, despite the fact that the technology is completely untested. Missile defense, I think, is another area which we have been throwing huge amounts of money, and I think with questionable results. The DDG 1000, the Zumwalt program, which the Navy seemed to come around saying we should cancel, and now they've kind of wobbled a little bit on building a third. I think we need to, really hold weapons procurement to a much stricter standard of performance. The GAO study that came out last year, certainly provided the roadmap for us to do that. So the answer is absolutely yes. We need to get fiscal discipline both on the domestic side and the military side. The Gang of 10 would extend those renewable tax credits to 2012 and pay for them by taking back some of the tax credits that were given out in 2005 to the oil companies. And again, I want to just emphasize that that pay for, that offset, is not about windfall profits. It's not about raising taxes on oil companies. It's just simply saying that the tax credits that were given to the fossil fuel industry in 2005 are no longer affordable, given what's happened to the price of oil and gas and the kind of profits that they have right now, and that we should redirect that type of tax incentive to the end of the system that really needs it right now. And again, you go around this district Westbrook Lee Company, an acre of solar panels that I helped hit the switch on about a month or so ago. Wyndham Hospital installed a fuel cell plant that's going to now provide 40% of the electricity for the hospital up there. STR Technologies up in Enfield, we got them a grant that they're building the lamination for solar panels. The company's going 24 hours a day right now. They're hiring 200 new workers. None of those enterprises would have been feasible without the production tax credits. I mean, that is the goose, to the system that really makes these transition costs into renewables affordable. And when T. Boone Pickens came to the caucus there right before the August break, I mean, he said the one thing that Congress can do right now that will, both in short term and the long term, really get us moving in a direction away from that 70% foreign oil dependence, is to get a long horizon on the renewable tax credits. And the opposition to doing that, I mean, I really think is something people should note, because these things expire at the end of December. I mean, there are Walmarts and Kmarts and Targets all over the country now. They're scrambling to install solar panels on the roofs, which is great, but they're also scrambling because they're afraid that these tax credits are going to expire before the end of December. And in terms of an urgent issue that we must act on, and we should have acted on before the August recess, that's one that I would certainly put right at the top of the list, like T. Boone Pickens. I was over in Westbrook. We were talking about when the plant shuts down, Lee Company. It's an aircraft parts manufacturer. They got about 800 employees there, very energy intensive. But they have like a weekend shutdown or whatever for 8 hours or so. And when those panels are sending power back into the grid, they get reimbursed at wholesale. When they are operating at full capacity, and again, those panels will pick up about 20% of the electricity costs, they're obviously paying the power company retail. So in Germany right now, when you're a solar, whether you're a homeowner or a commercial user, and you're sending power back into the grid, they reimburse 2 times retail. And what that does is it really shortens that transition cost, that investment cost, because you're making money when power is going back into the grid. And so I think we need to really look at issues not just about grants and taxpayer subsidies and all that stuff, but we need to be looking at our rate structure and really trying to reward the kinds of power that, again, aren't based on carbon and aren't based on imported sources. We know a lot more about the development of the human brain today than we did 30, 40 years ago when Head Start was created. I mean, now with sort of CAT scan technology, we have actually now been able to see that the neurons of the brain develop better when a young child is in a nurturing environment versus an environment that's not stimulating or that's violent. Really, it's just incontrovertible now that focusing on early childhood development is really about early brain development, and that the performance of a child after age 3, 5, I mean, almost any benchmark is much better when you've focused on those first 3 years, 4 or 5 years of life. And again, we reauthorized Head Start for the first time in about 8 or 9 years. Again, the prior Republican Congress had just let that languish. We created 10,000 new slots across the country in terms of Head Start programs. The College Cost Reduction Act set up some loan forgiveness for students who make a commitment to going into early childhood teaching, because that's an unaffordable profession for kids coming out of school with high debt, and the workforce needs at that end of the system, which is not a unionized area by and large. I mean, early childhood teachers usually work for small nonprofits or just tiny centers, is an area that needs a lot of help. And we actually increased some certification requirements for federally funded programs so that you've got qualified people doing that type of work, which just so you know, there was no resistance from providers that were out there. I mean, this is something that everybody agrees. You know, we've really got to strengthen as much as we possibly can. And so, you know, to me, it's a very important priority. And as I said, it's not just based on politics or special interest group support. It's based on what we know about the development of the human body and the human brain, and how, you know, young people succeed. How you pay for it, it's all about priorities. You know, it's the constant battle down in Washington in terms of you know, where you put your resources, and you know, with the budget rules that we talked about earlier, I mean, it's going to be a challenge, but certainly my committee choice of education and labor, you know, shows where, you know, my focus is as a member of Congress, and that's certainly something I'll be fighting for. You know, the sort of big bang healthcare approach, which Obama/Clinton's approach would be, you know, that could be you know, certainly one way to go in early January of 2009, but it's going to be a battle royal, because you definitely are you know, attracting all the contention that surrounds this issue with other groups that's there. And you know, whether the state experimentation path is sort of the way to you know, somewhat thread the needle as far as the politics of this issue, because that is very attractive, you know, to a lot of people, is that, you know, let's, you know, let other programs have a shot and see what works.
What's the downside of?
Well, the downside of it is that, you know, you've got a lot of benefits, health benefits, that are really regulated federally under ERISA, and you know, you've got to really, you know, if you were going to have a Connecticut plan, let's just say, okay, you know, and you've got ERISA benefits like electric boat, or other self-insured plans that now are, you know, shielded from state rules. You know, if you're really going to make a Connecticut-only plan work, you've got to really break down that ERISA barrier to include them in, or it just doesn't kind of all kind of add up to the critical mass that you need for a health plan.